So many different facets of your own personality that you can get to, and you find yourself repeating yourself. So there are actors like Olivier and Guinness. At 83, dying Paul Newman shocked the world one last time. On his deathbed, he placed a Panasonic recorder beside his pillow. Not for memoirs, but for confessions no one saw coming. 6 secret gay affairs with Hollywood's biggest stars. Names that could destroy decades of carefully built images. Blackmail and betrayal were covered up by the studio system. But who were the stars he exposed? And why were these tapes never supposed to surface? Join us as we reveal the old Hollywood actors that gay actor Paul Newman dated in secret. Number 6. Steve McQueen. Of all the names on Paul Newman's deathbed tapes, one stood out not just for fame, but for danger. Steve McQueen. Their affair began in the spring of 1956 during a weekend at the Chateau Marmont on Sunset Boulevard. Newman, then 31 and freshly launched into stardom with Somebody Up There Likes Me, was still finding his place in Hollywood. McQueen, just 26, was still hustling bit parts, hungry for power and willing to use anyone to get it. The affair might have remained just another secret tryst of old Hollywood, but McQueen turned it into something darker. What Newman later described as his most terrifying relationship began when he discovered that McQueen had been secretly recording their encounters. Every intimate word, every whispered confession, every desperate "I love you" was captured on reel-to-reel tapes hidden in the suite. To McQueen, it wasn't romance. It was leverage. When Confidential magazine, notorious in the 1950s for destroying reputations, threatened to run a story exposing Newman's sexuality, McQueen saw his chance. He presented Newman with a tight non-disclosure agreement and a threat so cold it rattled him for decades. You know what happens to people who get exposed, don't you? You've got a family. Don't let it all come crashing down. Newman, already married to Joanne Woodward by 1958 and with 3 children, had no choice but to be silent. The tapes didn't disappear. Nearly 20 years later, while filming The Towering Inferno in 1974, McQueen dropped a cassette into Newman's hand between takes, smiling as though it was a gift. His words were casual, almost mocking, just a precaution. For Newman, it was a reminder that his life, his family, and his career were always one leak away from ruin. The cruelty didn't end there. In 1980, during a taping of the M.V. Griffin Show, McQueen publicly humiliated him, smirking as he called Newman a creepy fan who sends love letters. Viewers laughed, unaware of the poison behind the joke. Newman, forced to smile through it, carried the sting for the rest of his life. On those deathbed recordings, Newman called McQueen the most dangerous man I ever loved. It wasn't the affair itself that haunted him, but the tapes, the proof that intimacy, once weaponized, could become a lifelong prison. McQueen turned love into blackmail. James Dean turned it into tragedy. What happens when fear costs you the one person who believed in you? Number 5, James Dean. Paul Newman's recordings revealed not only hidden loves, but also hidden regrets. None cut deeper than his short-lived romance with James Dean, Hollywood's eternal symbol of youth and rebellion. Their relationship began in early 1955 on the Warner Bros. Lot in Burbank. Newman, 30 years old and newly cast in Somebody Up There Likes Me, was still searching for his breakthrough role. Dean, just 24, was already a star after East of Eden and Rebel Without a Cause. His face splashed across magazine covers worldwide. What began as late-night conversations outside sound stages turned into something more intimate. Newman recalled weekends at a rented cabin in OG, just 90 mi from Los Angeles, where they shared bottles of bourbon, raced Dean's silver Porsche 550 Spider through the hills, and exchanged whispered promises far away from Hollywood's watchful eyes. But secrecy never lasted long in that era. One night, a freelance photographer named Eddie Prescott snapped a photo of them kissing through the window of Dean's car on Melrose Avenue. Within days, a gossip rag ran a column titled "Shadow Lovers of the Silver Screen." The piece never named them outright, but the descriptions were clear enough. Careers were fragile in the mid-1950s, and any hint of homosexuality could destroy a studio contract. Dean suffered the most. Under the pressure, he spiraled into depression, once overdosing on sleeping pills and ending up in Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, where the press cry branded him emotionally disturbed. Then came the final plea. In September 1955, Dean scribbled a note that read, "Mexico City, Friday. If you don't come, I'll understand." Newman later admitted he bought the ticket and even made it to LaGuardia Airport in New York. But fear of scandal, of exposure, of losing his family froze him. He never boarded the plane. 3 days later, on September 30th, 1955, Dean died instantly in his Porsche after a collision on Route 466 near Cole, California. He was only 24 years old. Newman, upon hearing the news, locked himself in his Manhattan apartment and drank for 2 days straight. On his deathbed, decades later, Newman whispered that Dean's death was the moment he chose cowardice over love. For the rest of his life, he was haunted by the words he never said and the promise he never kept. Dean's death left Newman haunted, but Brando would cut even deeper. How do you survive when your love letters become a front-page scandal? Number 4, Marlon Brando. Among Paul Newman's most painful confessions was his affair with Marlon Brando, the mercurial actor who at his peak seemed untouchable. Their paths crossed in 1961 at the Beverly Hilton Hotel during a post-Oscar party celebrating Brando's Academy Award for On the Waterfront. Newman, then 36, was just coming off The Hustler, a role that made him one of Hollywood's brightest rising stars. What began as admiration quickly evolved into something dangerous. Newman remembered how Brando arranged secret weekend flights to Palm Springs away from Los Angeles relentless press. They would escape to a rented Spanish-style villa near Tackett's Canyon where the two men shared quiet mornings. Strong coffee from a Westwood cafe flown in, especially by Brando's assistant, and long afternoons discussing acting, politics, and the growing civil rights movement. Newman believed he had found a confidant. What he didn't realize was that Brando was already plotting. By the early 1960s, Brando's star power was slipping. His last few films had flopped, and Paramount executives whispered that he was becoming box office poison. To keep his name in headlines, Brando turned intimacy into a strategy. The ultimate betrayal came when Newman's handwritten letters, private notes filled with confessions, love, and fear of exposure, surfaced in the hands of tabloid photographer Mark Weller. Weller's column, published in 1962 under the headline, "Love Behind the Lens," never printed the names, but the descriptions were obvious. The letters mentioned Brando's habit of wearing a red silk robe at the Palm Springs villa, and the detail was enough for insiders to connect the dots. Brando, rather than protecting Newman, allowed the leak to simmer because the scandal kept him relevant in a cutthroat industry where attention meant survival. The fallout reached Newman's home life. Joanne Woodward, his wife since 1958, discovered the affair when she found one of the leaked letters folded into a gossip magazine. Her handwritten note to Paul cut like glass. "If you need one more lie, I'm not the person who can help you." For Newman, Brando became the embodiment of betrayal. In his recordings, he summed up the wound in one devastating line. He used love like a knife. Every embrace was another cut. Brando betrayed him for publicity, yet Redford's betrayal was colder still. Why did Hollywood's golden boy move from partner to destroyer? Number 3, Robert Redford. Few relationships in Paul Newman's life carried as much promise and as much devastation as his hidden romance with Robert Redford. The two first met in 1968 during pre-production for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Newman, already 43 and a household name, was cast as the seasoned outlaw Butch Cassidy. Redford, 11 years younger and still considered an up-and-comer, landed the role of Sundance only after Newman insisted he was the right partner. That insistence forged a bond that went beyond the screen. Throughout the 1970s, their relationship evolved in secrecy. They spent long weekends at Newman's farmhouse in Westport, Connecticut, far from Hollywood's prying eyes. Friends recalled the pair disappearing for fishing trips in Utah or skiing in Aspen, where Redford would later build his Sundance Institute. To outsiders, their chemistry was dismissed as friendship, but Newman's private journals described it as a decade of love, laughter, and danger, our own hidden West. The breaking point came in 1976. By then, Newman was emboldened by his success with The Sting in 1973 and his growing reputation as a director. He scheduled a private interview with journalist Stephen Close of The New Yorker. Intending to go public about his relationship with Redford, it was a risky move at a time when homosexuality could still end careers. Redford's response was swift and calculated. Hours before the interview, The New Yorker received anonymous faxes alleging Newman was mentally unstable, violent on set, and addicted to prescription pills washed down with alcohol. Within days, gossip columns picked up the narrative. Painting Newman as a veteran star shunned for emotional instability, the interview was canceled and studios quietly began pulling Newman from leading roles. Meanwhile, Redford's career only soared. He released All the President's Men in 1976, cementing his reputation as America's golden boy. Industry insiders whispered about trouble with Newman while Redford's spotless image remained untouched. The final act of cruelty came in 1980 at the BAFTA Awards in London. On stage, when asked about Newman, Redford replied coldly, "We made something great together, but everyone has to move on." That night, Newman scribbled a line in his journal that captured the heartbreak of betrayal. "He didn't just deny me, he broke the real part of me I'd never dare bring into the light if it weren't for him." After Redford shattered him, Newman sought healing with Salmano. So why did tenderness end with a knife in the dark? Number 2, Salmano. By the mid-1970s, Paul Newman was carrying scars from his affair with Steve McQueen, scars that left him wary of intimacy. Yet in 1974, inside a quiet therapy office on La Cienega Boulevard in West Hollywood, he crossed paths with someone who would give him unexpected solace. Salmano Mo was no stranger to Hollywood's cruelty. After his breakout role as Plato in Rebel Without a Cause in 1955, he earned 2 Academy Award nominations before the industry abruptly discarded him. Studio executives branded him too sensitive, too real. Code words for someone whose vulnerability and rumored sexuality made him a liability in an era obsessed with masculine image. By the early 1970s, Mano was working mostly in theater, hustling for small TV roles to pay rent on his modest North Horn Avenue apartment. Their bond began after group therapy sessions when the two men would walk the West Hollywood streets together, stopping for late-night coffee at Duke's Tropicana on Sunset Boulevard. Newman later described those walks as the only time in Hollywood I felt safe holding someone's hand. "Mano, ever the poet," wrote Newman a note in 1975. "If they call you a freak, then let me be a freak with you." Those words, Newman confessed, felt like permission to breathe again. Together, they dreamed of escaping Hollywood's suffocating expectations. They planned a trip to Venice, Italy, to co-write a screenplay about 2 men who fall in love as their city sinks beneath the water, an allegory for their own lives. Newman even purchased 2 tickets for March 1976, a secret he admitted in his private tapes. But fate never allowed it. On the night of February 12, 1976, after rehearsing for the play P.S. Your Cat is Dead, Mano pulled his car into the alley behind his apartment. Moments later, he was stabbed once in the heart. He collapsed and died before paramedics arrived. Police labeled it a botched robbery, but Newman believed otherwise. In his deathbed confessions, he claimed Mano's murder was the price Hollywood extracts from those who dare live authentically. For Newman, Sal Mano was more than a lover. He was a gentle soul who offered healing. And his murder was the final brutal reminder of what it cost to love honestly in old Hollywood. Mano's murder left Newman broken. But Cliff's desperate letters finished the job. What happens when the love you cling to pulls you under? Number 1, Montgomery Cliff. Among all of Paul Newman's secret confessions, none carried as much weight or devastation as his relationship with Montgomery Cliff. By 1966, Newman was at the height of his career, with Harper hitting theaters. While Cliff was nearing the end of his once celebrated For a Place in the Sun in 1951, and From Here to Eternity in 1953, Cliff's life had been derailed by a near-fatal car crash in 1956 that left his face scarred and his confidence shattered. Alcohol and pills became his constant companions. Their bond, Newman admitted, was forged out of both tenderness and desperation. In early 1966, while filming Hombre in Tucson, Newman received a series of letters from Cliff written on hotel stationery. These weren't declarations of romance, but desperate cries for survival. One of them read, "I don't need you to choose me, I only ask that you don't deny my existence." Newman tucked those letters under his pillow in a Manhattan apartment he shared with Joanne Woodward, never imagining they would be discovered. The secret came crashing down when a wardrobe assistant rummaging through Newman's dressing room during fittings at 20th Century Fox found one of Cliff's letters and quietly sold it to the National Enquirer. Within 48 hours, the tabloid ran with a sensational headline, "Paul Newman and Monty Cliff, the buried truth." Though names were thinly veiled, the implications were unmistakable. The fallout was immediate. Executives at Fox demanded explanations, fearing the scandal would jeopardize Newman's upcoming projects. Joanne, humiliated and heartbroken, left a note that read, "If you choose to live in lies, at least don't drag me down with you." Newman's collapse was swift. Friends later recalled he checked into a psychiatric facility in Connecticut under a false name, citing exhaustion. Though insiders knew the truth, he had suffered a complete breakdown. 9 years later, on July 23, 1966, Cliff died alone in his New York townhouse from a heart attack just 45 years old. Newman received a call from him days before a conversation that reportedly ended in shouting and tears. He never forgave himself for the silence that followed. On his final recordings, Newman's voice broke as he confessed, "I thought I was strong, but I was only a coward who knew how to love." For him, Cliff wasn't just another secret. He was the one wound that never healed. Which of these 6 shocking affairs do you think caused Paul Newman the most pain? If Paul Newman's sealed tapes were ever released to the public, do you think Hollywood would try to cover it up again? Or would the truth finally set these legends free? Let us know what you think. Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen.